Prithvi Shantirantarikshagam Shantir Dyaus Shantir Disha Shantiravantaram Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantirme Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra Sukhinas Santu Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet Sarvastaratu Durgani Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu Sarvas Sadbuddhimapnotu Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. In our last class, we saw the first three verses in this Upanishad. The scene was laid out that here is this great Vedic worship that has started, and as a requirement, it's a sacrifice called Vishwajit. A requirement of that Vedic ritual was that whoever conducted that particular ritual had to give away their valuables, possessions. And as a result of those giving it away as charity to holy people, the merit acquired by the person would take the person to heaven. In the Vedas, it is said that every work will lead to some result. And so there are oftentimes specific rituals mentioned. If you want rain, well, do this ritual. If you want children, do this ritual. If you want more grain in your field, do this ritual. Now, there are certain rituals where no specific result is mentioned. And so there is a general rule in Vedic study that if no specific result is mentioned, it means that will take you to heaven, kind of a generic result. And wherever there is a specific result, then it is mentioned. So this particular sacrifice, Vishwajit, was supposed, literally, it means it makes you a conqueror of the whole world. Essentially, it brings you all the joys and the power that comes. And so this is the one that is supposed to take people to heaven. So a lot of people, usually wealthy people or kings, who had everything here in this life, they also want to provide for the afterlife. And if they were believer in the scriptures, they felt, well, if I do this, then my afterlife would be taken care of. I can go to heaven. And so, as I mentioned last time, nowadays we speak about redistribution of wealth, how the gap between the rich and the poor. And there can be secular or socialist reasons or arguments can be forwarded to how it's important to not have these great inequalities. That way of redistribution, if you like, kind of got embedded in a spiritual tradition as well. But it took a very religious color. And the idea was provide an incentive to the wealthy to share what they have with others who do not have as much wealth. And an incentive here was, well, if you do this, you will go to heaven. And so then they were encouraged to give away their valuables. And we saw here, in this particular instance, the son of this person who was doing the sacrifice, he noticed that his father was giving away cows. Cows was one of the important symbols of wealth in those days. And he was giving away these cows in charity to the Brahmins and the holy people at that time. But he found that those cows were old, they were useless, they were, as it is described in the book, that they were close to death. They were of no practical use to the people they were being given to. And so the son, who noticed that his father was doing this, was very much disturbed. And because he knew that this was not the right thing to do. His father was following the rule in letter, but not in spirit. Sure, the cows were his possessions, and he was giving away his possession, but they were not really valued possessions. And so the son decides to then bring it to the attention of his father. And he does it in a very different way than a child of 21st century would bring it to the attention of their parents. It's a very different way of doing it. So let's read that. Verse number 4. Sahovacha pitaram tata kasmai mam dasyasi iti. Dvitiyam tritiyam tam hovacha mrityavetva dadami iti. He said to his father, Father, to whom wilt thou give me? He repeated thus a second and a third time. Then the father replied angrily, Unto death I shall give thee. So, we can understand if it was a son or a daughter today, they might just go and say, Dad, this is wrong. You shouldn't be doing this. But those times were different. So, there was respect for the elders in the family, but they found a way to bring it to their attention if they were not happy with something. It wasn't as if you just keep quiet out of respect. That you do express your thoughts, express your ideas, but do it in a way very different than how today most children would do. And so what he is thinking in his mind is, he thought, let me be subtle about it. As a son, I'm my father's possession, and I think I'm a very valuable possession. So he said, Father, whom will you give me? To whom will you give me? And that was a very cheeky thing to do. And of course, father didn't appreciate it. And it wasn't as if he was doing it in private. There were all these, because it is a big sacrifice. There were lots of people around. And so the son goes and says, Father, whom will you give me? And sometimes, many of us, if there are younger members of the family, if they are doing something which you feel is inappropriate or not following the decorum, especially if you have guests at home, oftentimes you don't want to create a scene in front of the guests, and so the elders in the family would try to just ignore it. They would not respond. But and now that's what happened here. So the first time this Nachiketa told his father, Father, whom will you give me? The father just ignored, as if he didn't hear it. Then the son says, second time, Father, whom will you give me? The father ignores it again. Third time, Father, whom will you give me? Now he's really lost his temper. And so he says, unto death I give you. This is not very different from sometimes when parents or grandparents or within in a family situation, for instance, if someone is really mad, you can sometimes hear people say, I wish you were dead, or things like that. Now, oftentimes these things are said in anger. Nobody literally is thinking about it that way. Because there have been situations in life when someone said something angry, something so drastic like this, and then the other person says, oh, you want me to die? And then, let's say, unfortunately, maybe that person just takes it and maybe goes and kills himself or herself. But that can be such a devastating thing for the family. And then this person who said it would say, oh no, I didn't mean it. So a lot of times, out of anger or frustration or whatever, we say things, but we don't always mean what we say. Now that is what had happened here. His father said, that was, I think, the Vedic way of saying, I wish you were dead. He said, I give you to death. And now, this little boy who suddenly hears his father say, I give you to death. And so he retires into a corner and begins thinking, why did my father say that he wants to give me to death? And that's that reflection is there in the next verse, verse number 5. Bahunamemi prathamo, bahunamemi madhyamaha, kim svit yamasya kartavyam, yanmaya adya karishyati. Of many I am the first, of many I am the middlemost. Why then has my father said that he would give me to death? What work of Yama will be accomplished by his giving me unto him? So this boy now thinking in his mind, if my father is, why would father give me to death? Which is literally saying you die. And he thinks about himself and says, well, in many respects, I am the best among my father's children or among the people here. In many respects, I'm kind of middle. Middle means I'm kind of average, or at least above average. But in no respect, I'm the worst in anything. And so what purpose will be served? Why would father give me away? Why would my father wish that I were not here right now? And so thinking this, he comes to the conclusion that my father didn't really mean it literally, that he just said it in anger. So the boy is smart enough to understand that it was said in anger. Now, one important thing here is to pause and see the importance of self-assessment, self-examination. I think that's important. That this little boy, barely, maybe less than 10 years of age, that he could say to himself where he stands amongst his peers. That in certain respects he says, I am the best, in certain respects I am average. And that's not something, not a bad idea, if we can assess our own selves. Among our peers, among the people we live with or among the people we work with, where do I stand? As a person, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? sometimes in spiritual life, we focus so much on that ultimate prize of that being the infinite Brahman that we might sometimes lose sight of where we are now. Sure, the ultimate goal is clear and is very, well, it's great, well, it's the best. But we are not there yet. And so we have to find, yes, that's my goal, but where am I now? So we need a lower self-knowledge. So you could say there are two self-knowledges. I don't know when self-knowledge is the word. So self-knowledge with a small s and a capital S. The capital S is the real spirit, the Atman. And when we have that knowledge, the problem is solved, we are free. We are free from all the troubles of human existence. But before we get that higher self-knowledge, we need a lower self-knowledge. And a lower self-knowledge means right now, me with all my ignorance, with my human identity right now, where do I stand? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And the one who is able to do this kind of self-assessment as objectively as possible, as clearly as possible, has a better chance in progressing in spiritual life. Oftentimes we are fairly good at judging other people. What are the strengths or weaknesses of other people that we live with or work with? And in that case, we are often working with very partial knowledge, incomplete knowledge. I mean, how much can we know anybody from outside? And yet, with that incomplete knowledge about other people, we are quite, we don't have any hesitation in coming to conclusions about other people's weaknesses and strengths. But the only person we potentially know fully is our own selves. But self-assessment can sometimes become difficult because we are too close to ourselves. It's a little bit like if I hold the book here, about 30 inches from me, I can read it. If I hold it here, it's like 2 centimeters from my eye, I can't read it, just too close. So sometimes we are too close to ourselves to objectify and see ourselves as we see other people. And so a little bit of the loosening of our ego is important to have a accurate self-assessment. So people who are very egoistic are not very good at judging themselves. And we see in this particular verse, this Nachiketa, whose heart had become filled with Shraddha, he was very good at finding out where he stood. So that's one message that comes to us, the importance of self-knowledge. Once we are able to do this, at least initial assessment, it may not be perfect, but it's still worth making that effort. And if we are able to identify at least a few of our strengths and a few of our weaknesses, life becomes so much more easy going forward. Because oftentimes when we have a dilemma about making choices or taking certain decisions, this can be one factor which can be very helpful. That I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses. So doing something or choosing something, will it help me to reinforce my strengths or at least not lose them? Or will it help me to eliminate any of my weaknesses? If yes, then that's the thing I must choose. That's the thing I must do. So I must hold on to my strengths. Just because something can be counted as among my strengths, I should not take it for granted. Because if we don't preserve it, if we don't maintain it, if we don't take care of it, we will lose what our strengths are. None of them are like permanent. So we must find ways to preserve the strengths that we have. And if we have identified our weaknesses, we can begin working on them. And we don't necessarily have to work on all of them at the same time. That can be intimidating sometimes. But we can just take one or two. It's like if you have 10 items on your to-do list, it can be intimidating. Oh, there are 10 things. How am I going to do it? But a smart thing would be, okay, of these 10, which are the most important? Let me then do them one by one, one by one. And that's the way we can do in our lives also. Once we have identified our weaknesses, we can then say, okay, now while I'm going to be careful about not giving in to my weaknesses, I'm specifically going to focus on one, say for the next 3 months or 6 months or whatever. That's the way. It's a grind, it's a struggle, but it's a struggle that's more beneficial. It gives more practical results because everyone's waiting for a miracle. Of course, miracles are possible. God's grace can come anytime. But until God's grace comes, since we don't know when it is going to come, till that time, we should have some plan of our own. And that plan would be to identify our strengths and weaknesses, hold on to the strengths, and make concerted efforts to eliminate the weaknesses one by one. That's the way year after year we will be able to find tangible changes in our life. We will not care then so much about what other people think about us. We won't so much hanker after other people's recognition, a certificate about how good we are. Because we ourselves will know inside, yes, I'm a better person now than what I was last year. And that's very important. So that's one very important message that comes from verse 4. Now, his father has said, I give you to death. After self-examination, Nachiketa recognizes that my father didn't mean it literally. He just said it in anger. Now he thinks in his mind that my father is not doing this Vedic ritual properly. And because he's not doing it properly, that's going to bring him some unhappy results. If, when you are cheating, that will not lead to happy results. So he says, what is my duty now as a son so that I can do something by which my father will not have to suffer? So when we read in the earlier words that Shraddha entered into the heart of Nachiketa, that Shraddha here takes a more concrete form of adherence to truth. And so he says, my father said, I give you to death. I will make sure that his statement is not in vain. That I will uphold the truth of that statement. And that sacrifice of mine may mitigate the cheating, so to speak, that my father has done. So again, you see the respect he has father, the love he has for his father, that he is willing to suffer himself in order that his father will not have to suffer. And so, and he knows, he's a smart kid. He knows that, of course, if I want to go to death, his father is going to say, okay, no, that's not what I meant. And so now he goes to his father, and this is what he tells him. That is in verse 6. Anupashya yatha purve pratipashya tatha pare sasyamiva martyah pachyate sasyamiva jayate punaha. Remember how the ancients behaved, and mark also how others do now. Like corn, the mortal ripens and falls, and like corn is born again. So, we the Upanishad itself doesn't give a very detailed explanation about, oh, now he goes to his father and now he says this. So we have these kind of snippets, and so you have to fill in the blanks. So it's very likely that he goes to his father and then tells him, okay, you said you want me to go to death, I'm going to death. And his father says, no, that's not what I meant. I don't take it too literally. And now this son tells his father, no, it's better that your words don't go in vain. It's better that now that you have said this, hold on to your statement. Won't withdraw your statement. That will not be holding on to truth. And then he says, remember how the ancients behaved. So he's pointing out the value of tradition. Think about what the tradition is, that truth must be kept up. That's the kind of a tradition that we have learned from our ancestors. This is how the strength of a tradition comes in. What is the strength of a tradition? That truthfulness as a value. So this Nachiketa tells his father, see how the ancients behaved, and see how today, the good people today. So it's not something that it was only the ancients who held on to truth. There are people living even today who hold on to truth. So this is the tradition that has come to us from prehistoric times. So hold on to that tradition, because if we don't do it, what is the value of our life? And that's why he says, like corn, the mortal ripens and falls, like corn is born again. Every second, I don't have the statistic, but every second, several hundred babies are being born in this world. Even a planet is still a tiny little place. We'd have no idea about the extent of the material universe. But even on this tiny little planet called the Earth, every second, hundreds of babies are being born. And every second, hundreds of people are dying. We only get to know about some extraordinary situations when death occurs, or there is a terrorist attack, there is a hurricane, there is floods, and that comes in the news. But deaths are occurring all the time. They don't come in the news because, well, that's one other lesson that we see. If we depend exclusively on media for information, it will not give us the state of the world in which we are. As they sometimes say that if a dog bites a person, that's not news. But if a man goes and bites a dog, that's news. So yes, there are terrible things happening into this world. But remember, we are, what's the population now at least? About 7, 8 billion approximately. So to look terrible as the things are that are happening around us, but to put it in perspective, it's still a small number. The small fraction of the 8 billion human beings. We do not have any, do not know. There are catastrophic things happening in the animal world as well, but there is no way for us to assess that. But even looking at just the human population, most human beings are okay. They may not have everything, but they are okay. So the world is not as terrible a place as we might sometimes think it is if we depend exclusively on what we see on television or what we read in the papers. I'm sure all of us have gone to a planetarium now and then. And all of us may have had different experiences when we go to a planetarium and see whatever show. But one of the experiences that can come to many of us. It certainly did to me. The first time I saw a planetarium was in India. We had the first planetarium, I believe, in 1970, early 70s, 73 or 74. The first one was in Calcutta. And the second one in India came in Bombay. That was in the year 1976. And I had just joined the monastery. And the director of that planetarium in Bombay was a devotee. And so one of the early shows of that planetarium, he gave, I don't remember, but enough complimentary tickets so that all of us monks and brahmacharis could go for that show. And that was the first time. It was a big novelty. And so we went to see that. And when I came out, and we were discussing it among ourselves, it was quite shocking, really, when after the show ended and you came out, because what many of us would have noticed was, when you are there, it's probably an hour-long show. For a while, our vision gets expanded so much. You're thinking about these astronomical bodies, and you see even the physical vastness of the universe. And of course, in this whole scenario, you just see this earth is kind of a small little, not even a speck of dust. The sun, which is the brightest object that we know, is really a very insignificant star, even in our own solar system. Anyway, so when you come out into the streets and you suddenly have this traffic and people yelling and shouting at each other, it has a very jarring effect. Because then we think that in this larger picture, we are nobodies. I mean, our solar system itself is nothing. Within that solar system, the Earth is a very insignificant planet. And within this Earth, we are in some small part of the world. Within that world, in one small little city, in that one neighborhood and one little house, and among that house, we are just one person. And within that thing, everyone has a bloated ego. It's like, I am this. How could anyone do that to me? It appears so silly for a few minutes. And then, once you kind of align yourself to this world, and then again we kind of lose that sense of proportion. And so I remember some of us who were discussing it then, we were saying that every one of us must keep a small telescope with us. Every time the mind feels a petty or we just kind of get, our world narrows down. It's all about me. It's all about my, when that kind of thing occurs, it's helpful to just go out in the evening and then look at that telescope and see how big this universe is. And hopefully, that might make us a little bit humble to know. Well, this, what Nachiketa is saying is a little bit like that. That the only value our life can have is if we hold on to some of these timeless principles. If our life is just a bundle of compromises, then just as we were born at some point of time, in some moment, we're just going to die at some point. Maybe the people who are close to us might remember us for a few days. Maybe some of our photos may remain stuck in some album. And then we will be completely forgotten, because life just moves on. And this is not just with just ordinary people. Well, think about even these great prophets and incarnations and the saints and all the giants in every field, in science, politics, and everywhere. They have done wonders. But how many people remember them? Maybe if you're studying physics, then you might bump into some names of some physicists and maybe know a little bit more about them. But if that's not your field, You might have done wonders in certain fields, but other people won't know anything about them. The only people whose power continues to influence a large number of people are people who have been in the spiritual realm. Those today we worship as incarnations and prophets and so on. Compared to these specialists in other subjects, you see the influence of these ones is huge, but still not universal. So there is a limitation to, when somebody takes a human form and it has these human limitations, everything has an expiry date, even memory. And so that's what this son is telling his father, that think about, so don't stop me. Hold on to don't stop me from doing it, from carrying out your wishes. Because otherwise, our life will have no value. It's just like things come and things go. And again, every one of these words is not just about what Nachiketa said to his father. We have to relate it to our own life. Study of the Upanishad, study of any scripture will be beneficial if we relate as much as we can every verse to our own situation. And we can ask ourselves, what am I doing in life that my life won't be just this like corn, or any grain, or any plant that it grows up, or any flower that comes, it blooms for a while and then dies and then is forgotten. Does my life have any value deeper than that, greater than that? And so, and this also can make us ask ourselves that what are my values in life? Now, values is a term which is intimidating because everyone uses it, but if you say, well, what are really values? What do you mean by values? It may not be so easy to define it. But one way of understanding values would be, we can ask ourselves, is there anything in my life that I will never ever compromise with? And I would say, well, then that is a value in my life. Because, as I said earlier, if everything in my life is open for compromise, that I stand for nothing at all, then my life has no value. I'm not even living up to the human potential. What to speak about the potential of the spirit, which is infinite. And so, we have to ask, what are the things that are valuable to me? What are the things that I'm willing to compromise with? What are the things I'm not willing to compromise with? And that's the kind of a reflection that this verse encourages us to do. And so the story then, we will do the following verse next week, but just a preview. And so we see that Nachiketa then goes to death. Now, the death, as personified in Indian mythology and also in Upanishads, has a specific name called Yama. Now, Yama in popular mythology, it looks pretty fierce. Some of these Kathopanishad pictures, if you see some of the titles, they'll have this. Yama usually has a lot of these deities, they have a vehicle. And so Yamas is supposed to have a buffalo, a water buffalo as his vehicle. He'll be sitting in a buffalo and he's kind of something like a baseball bat, like kind of some kind of a weapon in hand. Pretty fierce looking. But that's a very popular misconception. A Yama actually is an exceptionally holy person. In fact, by the name, the Yama, Yama means control, self-restraint. So, when people die, from among those people, one who is exceptionally pure, exceptionally self-restrained, exceptionally holy, such a person is then given this job of, it's almost like a governorship of one of the celestial worlds. It's called Pitriloka. Pitru means all the departed spirits. So one who is kind of a manager of the land where the departed spirits go. And it's a responsible position. And because that's where the departed spirits go immediately after death, so Yama got called as God of Death, not as some very fierce-looking person kind of dragging you. But so Yama is a very holy person. That's why, as we'll see in this Upanishad, Yama is actually the teacher who will teach Nachiketa. Yama also is not the name of a specific person. Yama is a position. And so, nobody lives permanently in these celestial worlds. None of these worlds are lokas. It's called Yamaloka, Chandraloka, Suryaloka, Brahmaloka. All of these lokas, no one stays there eternally. So, one goes and stays there for a while. And after some time, they have to be reborn again. So, when that Yama's time in that Pitriloka is over, or whichever person is holding that position of Yama, when their time is over, then somebody else goes and occupies that position. So Yama, therefore, is a position, not a person. But in this particular case, of course, there's always somebody is filling that position. So when Nachiketa goes, there is this, whichever person was holding on to that position, that person becomes the teacher. And what happens after that, you can read it, but we will discuss it when we meet next week. So if you have any thoughts, ideas, questions about what we have seen today? Yeah.
For the Gita, we have the Mahabharata through which we can learn a lot about Arjuna. Mm-hmm. And just reading the first 4 passages of this, Nachiketa, is fascinating, and we'd love to learn more about him. Is there any other story in which this comes, or how do we...
No, not that I'm aware of. Yama comes in many different places. Yeah. The story here is it just provides a backdrop to the real teaching that will come later on. So that's why the story doesn't go into too much detail about who is Nachiketa, which school did he go to, all those things it doesn't deal with. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
Swamiji, actually I had a related question to what Vikram asked. Is there any significance as to why the setting is a 10-year-old boy asking these questions to his father? No.
The Upanishad itself doesn't give any reason, but Upanishad doesn't stop us from speculating. So, among the reasons that come to mind immediately, one would be to show that age is no barrier, that even at that young age, it's possible for that kind of sensitivity, understanding, that deep Shraddha to enter into the heart. So, because sometimes we tend to underestimate the intelligence of the younger members of our family, I think. And so this thing at least reminds us that there may be enormous wisdom even in so age is really no barrier. So just because someone is old doesn't necessarily mean that person is wiser. That's why I say, what do they say? gray hair is a sign of age, not of wisdom. That's what one of the quotes I had read many years ago. And that has become now more meaningful to me after I got my own gray hair. Yeah.
Swamiji, question. Why does Nachiketa think that he's one of the possessions his father is going to give away? Like, is it?
No, what? As I said, he rather than go and tell his father that no, that's wrong. You shouldn't be doing this. So he puts it in an indirect way.
It's kind of revolting. Like he wants to be showing he doesn't want to, like, he's kind of opposing his father or telling him not.
Absolutely, he's unhappy with the way his father is doing it, and I mean you can kind of understand also why his father got angry, because sometimes if your child comes and tells you something directly, you might appreciate it. But if the child is trying to be like smart, trying to do it in a different way, that might annoy old elderly people more, I guess. Yeah. Okay, so we will stop here today, and then we will continue on verse 7 when we meet next week. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhuhu. So we'll continue with the study of the Upanishad next Wednesday. On Sunday for the satsang, our subject will be, are all religions the same? And Tuesday and Saturday, our meditation will also continue as usual. Let's conclude with a prayer. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you.